If you've been waiting a week for the second episode of Loki, you don't need to wait any longer. It is here with glorious purpose and it was fantastic. My name's Al, this is the Geek in Review, so let's get to it. One thing that Marvel shows, or the two Marvel shows that we've had, could be criticised for is a bit of a slow and a plodding pace. And I pretty much expected that from Loki. I did mention it in one of my earlier videos that in WandaVision and Falcon, the big payoffs weren't really till the last episode or two, but this show is changing the pace and kind of the format. I'm not going to get too into spoilers straight away. I will let you know when that's going to happen in the video. But first of all, if you haven't taken the time to subscribe to the channel, please do. It would mean a lot. I'm putting out a lot more videos. Loki stuff, Star Trek stuff, and everywhere in between. But let's get back to Loki episode 2. Now, there's kind of a fake out that it opens, we think we're somewhere in the Middle Ages, but it turns out that we're actually in a Renaissance fair in 1985. And the Loki that's on the run, who I'm just going to refer to as the variant, has laid a trap for the TVA agents and pretty much dispatches them straight away and then steals some of their equipment and disappears. We then open up with our Loki, who appears to be going through or finishing his training with the TVA. And if you've ever done one of those work knowledge quizzes, you know his frustration, man, because I understand that stuff's necessary, but that's probably not the best format to try and teach people in, certainly not adults, certainly not as guardian gods. And he's got no time for this at all. He quickly interrupts him and lets him know that the variant has got a drop on some of his agents, so they set up to go and investigate. Now, this is where it kind of gets interesting pretty quickly in this episode, because when I'm talking about the other variants of Loki, we actually see them, and yeah, look, this opens up a lot of doors. I'm not going to post any pictures of this or any videos, but yeah, we see some very different versions of Loki, and our Loki then goes into a bit of detail about the difference between some of his powers that we might have assumed were the same thing, and he explains how there's a difference between sort of manipulation and projection of an image. And also we learn that he's pretty insecure because the Time Variant Authority consider the variant Renegade Loki the one that's the real threat, and they don't care about the Loki that we know at all. He even says that at one point, like, when I get my powers back and betray you, aren't you worried about that? And Mobius is just like, nah, doesn't matter. And then he dangles the carrot of meeting the Timekeepers in front of Loki, which these guys are going to come up a lot in this season, but yeah, in this episode, if the Timekeepers aren't mentioned in a scene, they're usually somewhere in the background in a statue or a picture or something like that. And we learn a little bit, not a lot about them in this episode as well, but I'm going to get to that later on. So they go back to the 1985 crime scene, and this to me felt like CSI or Law and Order that had a very police procedural feel to it. And Loki being Loki, tries to play a little bit of a trick or deceive the TVA and basically says, look, we're standing on a landmine, or this is an ambush, if you go out that door, people are going to die. And you don't know if he's being serious or not, because he does go into details about how he thinks and how Loki sort of generally would think. But Mobius is just, nah, you ain't doing it, man, you ain't going to do this, and calls his bluff straight away.
Wow, right? Yeah, great, amazing.
One thing that really picks up the pace of this episode as well, and the first episode I would say was merely a reminder, reintroduction of Loki. This episode is an introduction more to the TVA. Once they set off their device and cleanse the crime scene, and it really did look like that bit in WandaVision when the town expanded and everyone turned into circus clowns and stuff like that. It was a really sort of similar effect, but I enjoyed it. We then see how the sort of cleansing or healing of the time stream is monitored by the TVA back at their headquarters. And in this episode as well, Mobius defends Loki a lot. He thinks he's got a lot to learn from this guy, and although everyone at the TVA seems worried that Loki is playing Mobius, from his point of view, he sees it that he's playing Loki. And his superiors think he's playing a dangerous game, and I suppose he is a little bit as well. And once they realise they've not got any leads to go on, Mobius just decides that what they need to do is hardcore investigative research. So he puts Loki sort of in, I guess, TVA records or library, something like that. And it really reminded me of the scene in Seven when Morgan Freeman's character goes to the library after dark to study the texts that the killer's been using. But Loki being Loki, he thinks he can be a bit sneaky and get some information on the TVA. And we find out that these guys are actually covering some stuff up, probably with good reason. He wants to know how they were how the Timekeepers came into being power, essentially, how the TVA was existed. He asks about the start of time and the end of time, and all this information is classified. Which, to me, makes sense. I mean, are the Timekeepers hiding something? At this point, I'd say 100%, almost certainly. But I say they are mentioned a lot throughout this episode. And this is where I'm going to get into spoilers a little bit, so be warned that Loki does make his plan known pretty much straight away, that he wants to overthrow the Timekeepers and take control of the TVA. But as he can't get any access to any information that he wants, the only thing he can look into is himself. He starts reading his own file. And last week, we've seen pretty much all the major events of Loki's life after the Avengers, the Dark World, the murder of his mother, or the fact that he kind of caused that, the sort of reconciliation between him and his brother, his father's death, and then his death at the hands of Thanos. But it never occurred to me last week that there's a few big events missing out. And this episode really focuses on one of them, which is the destruction of Asgard itself. Loki didn't know that this happened, he never seen that in the last episode. And this was a really powerful moment, because when you think our initial introduction to Loki was that he wanted to take the throne of Asgard, he thought that it was his, and now that his first grand prize has been destroyed, it's hard to tell that if he's sorry that his people are now decimated, or he's sorry that he's never going to be the ruler of Asgard. And I don't know, this is kind of hard to tell. What do you think? You can let me know in the comments below or on Twitter. But it made me realise there's another event that Loki doesn't know yet, is that he's got a sister. We did see him watch Odin die, but we didn't see the events after that, so he's still not got any idea that Hela existed or what happened. So could Cate Blanchett show up in this? I'd like to see her. I think a lot of people would like to see Hela back, but I doubt it. But then again, you never know. This episode was so full of surprises, man. It's hard to tell. But while he learns of the destruction of Asgard, it puts a little idea in his head that the perfect place to hide in time would be a place where no one is, i.e. some sort of apocalypse event where there was no survivors or witnesses. So he tries to convince Mobius of this, and then they go back to Pompeii to watch the volcano erupt, and Loki proves his point by screaming exactly who he is, where he's from and what he's doing, and the people don't react. And then the volcano explodes, Loki and Mobius disappear, and he's proved his point that there's a blind spot in the TVA that this variant is hiding out in. And this does raise another great point to this whole story arc and the backstory of the TVA. Loki sort of realises that everyone we know in the MCU, Iron Man, Captain America, Black Widow, everyone that we've met, is they're just going along this sort of roadmap that the Timekeepers are trying to maintain, and they've got no idea that they're not in control. So Loki sort of questions Mobius, is there such a thing as free will if everyone is sort of just following someone else's plan? And we'll be here all day like that scene in Looper, so I'm not going to get into that particularly. And this is where we start to see the whole time travel element of this story, because they start looking into events that haven't happened in the MCU yet. They mention several natural disasters that are about 20 or 30 years in the future, and they realise that the variant is at the point of one of these disasters, and they go back to try and find them. And the event is sort of like a Hurricane Katrina in the 2050s. And they end up at a Roxcart shopping centre, which is a big Walmart or Asda. I'm sure you know what they are. I'm sure you've been to shops and shopping centres before. But they're bringing Roxxon back. We knew that they were. This has been featured, or this company's been featured in the MCU for a while, most notably in Iron Man 3. Their name was all over the tankers in the final scene there. And this is when it starts to really get deeply into spoilers, so if you don't want to know anything, you haven't seen this episode, look away. they pretty much encounter the variant straight away. Well, not exactly the variant. This version of Loki is taking control of people's bodies and talking to the OG Loki through them. There's a bit of a creative fight sequence with a vacuum cleaner, which I thought was kind of fun. And then we meet Loki, and shock horror, it's female. Now, we're pretty much knew at this point that we're going to get a female Loki in this season, but I didn't think this was going to pop up so soon. And the OG Loki says, look, this is my plan. I want to destroy the Timekeepers, take control of TVA and all the time, and I want you on board for that. And then, shockingly, the variant turns around and says, nah, I'm not interested in that, man. Forget about it, that's not my thing. And then the variant's plan, which usually, again in these Marvel seasons that we've seen so far, the plan doesn't really show up to about the second or third to last episode, is the variant's plan happens. All the sort of bombs explode and the time stream starts branching off, and we see everything going mental at the TVA. It's like one of those scenes in a Cold War film where they've seen that the Russians are launching the nukes and they're just watching it on screen. There's nothing that they can do. The scrambling guys throughout time. What the ramifications of this are going to be, what we're going to see, what changes are going to happen. It's going to be crazy and I'm going to love it. It's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. You can also follow me on Twitter at The Geeks Reviews. If you would subscribe to the channel, it would mean lots. I've been Al, and thanks for watching.